Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Poo. In this episode 571, I'm joined as always by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPan89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing?
Not a victory Wednesday, unfortunately, but doing pretty well. Dug out of snow.
Yes, definitely not a victory Wednesday. And yes, there is snow outside, which is fun or miserable depending on your point of view. We're not here to talk about the snow. We're here to talk about the Knicks, who also are fun or miserable, depending on your point of view. Sometimes both. Before we do that, I do have to let you know that this is our twice weekly reminder that you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Strickland. The $6 tier gets you access to this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to the Strickland Discord where you can converse with our other patrons as well as the site staff. You can also subscribe to the $9 tier. That gets you access to Strickland NFL, which is a podcast about the NFL that's hosted by Constantine Metricos and Luca. You also get access to Strick and Roll, the pod that I host with YC, along with other benefits. There are other further tiers if you're interested, but if enough people subscribe, I can no longer do this ad read, which would be a benefit to all of us. Also, thank you to our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel has you covered for all of your sports betting needs. NBA regular season, futures, prop bets, they have it all. Check it out on FanDuel. The Knicks lost last night to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a game that was... I don't even really know how to describe it because it was a bad loss, obviously, for the Knicks. The Knicks lost 109-94 to the Cavs, but it was a game that just kind of meandered. I don't even think the Cavs played that well. I didn't think the Knicks played well. I didn't think the Cavs played that well, and I think a lot of the gap in the game really did come down to just the Knicks shot the ball worse than Cleveland, but I don't want to boil it down just to that because I think this game got away from the Knicks in a way that was really odd. It was like the second half, especially, it felt like it was being played very dispassionately by both teams. Honestly, it just felt like they were kind of content to do what they do and play it out. I don't think either team threw much out there tactically. I don't think much was attempted. And I got to say, I don't think the Knicks need to be some 5-out team all the time. That's not how they're constructed to begin with. And I don't know that it's necessary to play one single way all the time, or that playing one single way all the time has some benefit that trumps the ability to be versatile. I think versatility is key. I think versatility is important. And, one of the great things that the Knicks have with this roster is, they can play 5-out, but they can play double big. They can play, 4-out, 1-in. They can do a lot of different things. And that's a benefit. But the key to getting, the reward from that versatility is to actually use the versatility. And I have not particularly loved a lot of the decisions that Mike Brown's been making since the All-Star break. The Sohan experiment, I talked about this on the post game that we did after the win against Chicago on Sunday, but it's not really you're not actually fucking experimenting with Sohan if you just use him as a traditional 3-4 wing next to a center, especially if the fucking center is Mitchell Robinson or Ariel Hukporti, who we know are not spacing the floor. I don't understand the purpose of that. If that was the vision for what you wanted out of Jeremy Sohan, then you should have just never signed him. Flat out. There was no benefit to that. There's no fucking world where he's going to be useful or good in that capacity. And I don't even know if there's a world regardless of that. You could create the ideal circumstances for Jeremy Sohan, and he might not be useful. I tend to fall on that side of the ledger when it comes to Jeremy Sohan. But I know for fucking sure that if you want him to be productive, this is not the fucking way. It is not the fucking way. And I know he only played 2 minutes or whatever it was against Cleveland. But that was 2 minutes too many if that's the fucking paradigm that you're going to put him in. And he was atrocious against Chicago. He's been atrocious in every game he's played.
Is there can I just on that? just to play devil's advocate a bit, we have seen teams like Houston, right? Kind of a versatile. Sohan can pass a little bit, and those double big lineups, right, can maul teams on the offensive glass. Is that kind of maybe the thinking here from Brown? That this double bigs have come back a little bit in terms of giving you advantages on the glass, especially if the other guy, the second big, can play make a little. I'm talking about Sohan. Would that?
I mean, maybe, but they're not really using him in a playmaking capacity either. Like, he's just kind of out there and he's operating. To me, it largely looks in the same spots that you would have an OG Anunoby in, that you might have a Mikal Bridges in, that you have a Josh Hart in. Not even Josh Hart. Josh Hart
gets probably a more impactful offensive rebounder, right? Too. So,
I mean, I guess, like, if that's the vision, then I wouldn't have signed him. If that was really if that's really the fucking selling point of like Jeremy Sohan is, oh, he's gonna be some offensive rebound monster, and that's gonna double down on our strengths. Like, that's, don't even sign him, because you have better offensive rebounders and you have guys that know how to play here. Diawara went 0 3 from 3 yesterday. I don't, whatever. He wasn't fantastic or anything, but like, it was pretty obvious to me just watching Diawara play, compare his minutes to Sohan's minutes. Like, he fits. Like, it's very obvious how he fits. He's more comfortable. He's a more natural plug and play kind of wing in the rotation in that exact spot than Sohan is. Even though he didn't have a good game yesterday, I think it was very visible that you can see that. And, whatever. I don't want to belabor the Sohan point, but like, it bleeds into the larger stuff that I've seen after the All-Star break, where because you're trying to get Sohan in, it limits, forget 5 out. It limits how much you're playing 4 out. Right? Because you're playing Sohan with Mitch. You're playing Sohan with Huck Porty, like we saw against Chicago. Like, you're playing him with Mitch, as we saw against last night, and also against Houston. Like, none of this is productive. It hurts. And on top of that, it hurts the rest of your offense. The offense has not been good since the All-Star break. It has not been good. They've scored 111 points against Detroit. They scored 108 against Houston. They scored 100 or wherever it was against Chicago. I don't remember the exact score there. And then they scored 94 last night. And, they scored 105 against Chicago. Some of that was, foul stuff at the end of the game. But anyway, like, they're not in a good rhythm right now. And I think Mike Brown has to take a lot of the responsibility for that, and he has to take a lot of the blame for that. And he's got to figure it out, because the stretch right now the Knicks have coming up is not easy. They play the Bucks on Friday. They play the Spurs on Sunday. They play the Raptor at Toronto on Tuesday. They got Thunder visiting next Wednesday. Then they go to Denver, to the Lakers, to the Clippers. This is the toughest stretch of their season, and they're not going to win the games that they need to win if the offense continues to look like this. And let's not just put the blame on Mike Brown. And Mike Brown, look, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. Mike Brown has been, as far as I'm concerned, been pretty fucking awful in these 4 games. I thought he got very lucky against Houston. I hated the Sohan sub that he made in the first half. I thought that allowed Houston to get a foothold back in the game, and it gave them an opportunity and a platform then to, even it up and eventually take a commanding lead. The Knicks really didn't get going until the fourth quarter, when, yes, he played a 5-out lineup. Do I think they won the game because he played a 5-out lineup? I don't know. I think that's playing the results a little bit, but you can't deny that that's what happened. And he benched Mikal Bridges. He benched Josh Hart. Like, those are big-time decisions, and he deserves credit for that. But to be in that position in the first place, to get down 18, and to coach the way he did through the first 3 quarters, and certainly from midway through the first quarter through the end of the third, I thought it was pretty fucking bad. And, luckily there was enough time in the fourth quarter to make a comeback. Karl-Anthony Towns, Landry Shamet, Jose Alvarado, those 3 guys were fantastic leading the Knicks in that comeback. So kudos to them. But, I don't think it's been great. And the Chicago game was awful. I mean, look, you're just better than Chicago, so you can get away with it. But, like, you go back and watch that game, it's not pretty. The offense does not look good. The starters actually were fine in that game. They were good in that game, which they should be, right? You're playing an outmatched Chicago team. Of course they should be good. But, a lot of those minutes, again, it's like you're not 5 out. You're not 4 out a lot of times because this fucking Sohan thing. And those minutes were all terrible. I mean, the Knicks are up 13 in the third quarter against Chicago. Sohan comes in, and they immediately go on a run and bring the game back to whatever it was, 7 points. And then eventually they even take the lead late in the fourth quarter. But the point is, like, you can't just bleed minutes, right? Like, we shit on Tibbs for this last year, right? Because it's like you're playing the starters all these minutes and they're not playing well right now. Try different shit. And I think Mike Brown, he's willing to try different shit. And look, this is part and parcel of experimentation. I just question some of the experimentation as far as like what is actually the purpose of the lineup. What are we trying to work towards? And I haven't seen a lot of that, especially in these 4 games since the All-Star break, have not been good. And I just think that's like very, very obvious. And you know, I've said a lot about Mike Brown here, and I've just got to say it because I think it needs to be said. A lot has been said about Karl Anthony Towns. A lot has been said about Mikal Bridges. A lot has been said about Josh Hart. And all those 3 guys, obviously none of them are perfect because no player is perfect. They've deserved and warranted criticism at various points this season, last season, their careers, whatever. I understand that Jalen Brunson is the favorite son of New York, and he should be. He's earned it. His track record in New York speaks for itself. He's been a big-time, crunch-time player for the Knicks. He's been, I mean, even this year, obviously, he's been really good in crunch time. He's delivered in postseasons. He's been an incredible postseason player in New York. But I don't think he's played well for the last couple months. I really don't. And you can look at the game log he's had, and, you know, look, there are some standout games there, but he has not commanded games the way that a all-NBA, you know, credentialed, ballyhooed point guard should in these last couple months. He just has not done it. Aside from the Nuggets game, in which he was fantastic. I mean, that was maybe his game of the season. I have not liked how he's played. And more than, forget how I like it, how you like it, whatever. He has not put together a complete game start to finish in the last couple months. He's not done that consistently. I mean, look at the Houston game. Yes, he is lights out in the fourth quarter on both ends, actually, right? He draws 2 charges in the fourth, which were fantastic plays, maybe the bit play of the game, drawing the charge on Durant. He goes 4 of 4 in the fourth quarter. I mean, you talk about big time shots, that all of those shots were big time. But prior to the fourth quarter, he was not good. And again, I put a lot of that on Mike Brown, but he's got to own some of this too. You know, he's playing an extremely methodical style right now, and I don't know what the purpose of the methodology even is. Like yesterday, he gets a switch on a Jared Allen out of a timeout in the third quarter. And okay, like, is Jared Allen the best guy to mismatch on? I don't think so. But it's not. That's a matchup you're fine with if you're the Knicks. It's a 1-4 flat. You got a mismatch on Jared Allen with Jalen Brunson. Like, yeah, I like that opportunity. I'm fine with that. Is that the play I'd want out of a timeout? Probably not, but it's fine. It's okay. And he's just dribbling. Like, he's not doing anything. He's not taking him on. He's not putting on moves. And then he ends up having to take an off-balance jumper. And it's like, I don't know what the purpose of that play is. And you can point the finger at Mike Brown, but that's an advantageous opportunity as I see it. Jalen Brunson on Jared Allen and an ISO, that's an opportunity for him to create off the bounce and create an advantage, either for him to score or for others to create. And look, did the Knicks shoot the ball well, even in opportunities that he created yesterday? No. Like, we know that, obviously. But he's not playing consistently, and I think the rhythm of the team, the flow of the team, when he's been off the floor in these last few games, has been better than when he's been on the floor. I think, like, you know, even the Houston game, right? Yes, he's fantastic on the stretch. One of the reasons I think he was fantastic on the stretch is he's sharing the floor with Alvarado, and Alvarado is able to take on some of the ball handling responsibilities and ease that up on him. And he's got to play better, flat out. He has not been good enough for the season, as far as I'm concerned. This has been his worst season in New York. I don't personally think that's very controversial. He's at the lowest true shooting percentage that he's had in his time as a Knick. He's at 58.5 true shooting. Prior 3 seasons, 59.7 in 2022-23, 59.2 in 23-24, 60.5 last year, 58.5 this year. His play-by-play, he is a minus 0.2 on-off. Look, I think on-off is a little bit shaky. He had a worse on-off last year. I don't think anybody would suggest that he had a bad season last year. But his minutes, they're not winning them, right? That's safe to say. And that is something to monitor. He had the worst plus minus of the Knicks starters last night at minus 21. And this is not some one-off thing. He's not consistently been winning the plus minus column, as we like to put it. And I just don't like the way he's been playing. I don't know how else to put it in that. I don't think he's in a good rhythm. I don't think he is seeing the game, feeling the game the way you want him to. I don't think he's doing a good job of getting Karl Anthony Towns involved. Karl Anthony Towns was 5 of 5 from the field yesterday. That's pretty good. You know what else sucks about that? That he took 5 fucking shots. And that's on Mike Brown. But that's also on Jalen Brunson. You got to do a better job of getting your big guy involved. And there was that clip that during the end of the Houston game where he's yelling at Cal, get the fuck in the post or post the fuck up, whatever he said. And I'm cool with that because he's right. Karl Anthony Towns sometimes has to fucking get his ass in the post. Like, you want the ball, go get your ass in the post. That's fine. But there are also times where Karl is free in the post, above the 3-point line, wherever, and Brunson's not delivering him the ball. Again, I think he is, I said it at the start. It was a very meandering game. The Knicks kind of just walked through it, it felt like. I think he is a huge part of that. Like, he is walking through games, and there's no flow, there's no pace to it. It doesn't feel like he's playing right now with a muddled mind. And what I mean by that is I don't think he really is going in to each possession with a clear idea of, this is what I want to do, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I'm trying to create, this is the play, this is the thing. That entire third quarter yesterday, I asked Shaq, he hasn't got back to me, but it just felt like the Knicks were freelancing the whole time, and I think Brunson is always central to when they get into one of those modes where it's just freelance stuff. But yeah, I think those two guys, Mike Brown, Jalen Brunson, look, 4 games to All-Star break. I know Brunson had a nice box score game against Detroit, and his issues largely in that game, honestly, were much more on the defensive end than offensively. But I don't think either of them has come out of this All-Star break firing on all cylinders. And you're 2-2. If you told me 2-2, that would be a record coming out of these 4 games prior to the All-Star break, I'd have been like, okay, that's okay. Yeah, I can see that. But I don't like how they've played for the most part. I mean, how many good quarters would you say they've had in these 4 games? I think you would say maybe the first quarter against Detroit, the fourth quarter against Houston, maybe the first quarter against Houston too, and then the third quarter against Chicago. I don't think they played a single good quarter yesterday. I mean, maybe you could argue the second. That's about it. You can't win games like this consistently. You're going to play middling 500 ball that is buoyed largely by the fact that you are more talented than most teams in the NBA playing this fashion. They are not playing greater than the sum of their parts. They are not playing together consistently as a team. They look way too often like disparate individuals trying to find themselves. And that's something that was always the case when they play poorly. But it needs to change, and it needs to change fast because the games are not going to get easier in this upcoming stretch. And I'm looking squarely at Mike Brown. I'm looking squarely at Jalen Brunson. Those two guys are, Mike Brown was the biggest change the Knicks made in the offseason, and Jalen Brunson is the franchise player. I am sick and tired of talking about Karl Anthony Towns. I am sick and tired of hearing about how many picks the Knicks gave up for Mikal Bridges. I'm sick and tired of it because we're not getting enough from the head coach or the franchise point guard, franchise player, forget point guard, franchise player, for me to start worrying about the other stuff. And quite honestly, I'll just say it flat out. I think Karl Anthony Towns has been a punching bag this year because a lot of Knicks fans don't want to talk about Jalen Brunson and the fact that he's not a perfect player and that he's going to make mistakes and that he has bad moments and he has bad stretches and he has stretches where flat out he's looking more to create for himself and can get lost trying to do that than kind of set other guys up. And then he veers too far in the other direction where it's like, oh, he's becomes very conscious of like, oh, you know what? I played like an asshole last game. Now I got to set guys up. And it's like, he has to find the equilibrium, the balance, and that there's a cadence to it and there's a rhythm to it. And right now he is out of rhythm. He is out of sorts. And he has to get it together consistently. And Mike Brown has to do a better job of helping him get it together consistently because playing him in these fucking, ISIS spacing fucking two nonsense players out there. I mean, one nonsense player and another non-shooter like a Mitch or a Harkporty is doing him no favors either. So there's a lot to clean up and there's a lot to fix. The Knicks have 2 days off, but I did not like what I saw yesterday, and I thought it was a microcosm of a lot of the issues we've seen since the All-Star break. Sorry for the extended rant.
No, I mean, I think most people would agree with a lot of that. I think the specific reason Cat is a punching bag has to do with his style. I think, I mean, if you remember, I'm not saying Cat is as good as Dirk Nowitzki, but if you're kind of a
You heard it here first. You heard it here first. Cat is literally Dirk Nowitzki.
Well, he did say he's the best shooting big man of all time, and Dirk would be, now I guess Jokic would be the two guys you would say, maybe he's wrong on that. But I think it's a stylistic thing where those guys get held to a higher level of standard, right? Even when Mitchell Robinson has a bad game, we see the way he's throwing his body around and fighting for every rebound and, the physicality. And fairly or unfairly, people have a preference for that type of big. Going back to some of the points you mentioned, with the Sohan thing, I do believe it's just an experiment. The same way he tried to figure out different ways to get Clarkson going. I would like to see Sohan actually used as a 5 if you're going to use him, to your point. But it's not at the point where it's worrying me yet that he's doing that. I still think we're in, he's experimenting to try to get the most out of the versatility. I would have liked to see more of it, more experimentation. Definitely yesterday. I thought yesterday and then against Detroit, there hasn't been a lot of opponent specific stuff. I would imagine we'll see more of that in the playoffs. But this is something that I've kind of discussed. We've been happy, I think, for most of the season to see Brown try different things. They've tried to go up tempo. They've tried to change things, different lineups. And generally he's hit the mark a little. He's hit the mark quite a bit. What I'm curious about is it's fine if he's throwing darts in the regular season because that's what we wanted, right? Has he learned enough? And as a coach, is he able to, in a 7-game series, make the adjustments, deploy the right lineup at the right time based on a hypothesis, right?
Well, I guess I just want to ask you this question since you brought it up. Wouldn't you say, I think it's, if we were where Detroit is, right, in the standings, I think you'd have a little bit more understanding of trying weirdo shit that doesn't even make sense really to you. But it's okay, well, you've kind of earned the right to try that stuff because you have a 6-game lead or whatever in the standings and you can get away with it. Don't you think that given where the Knicks are in the standings, and I look, do I ultimately think there's a massive difference between being the 2 seed and the 4 seed? I don't. I know that people will be like, well, then you have to play Detroit in the second round. Okay, you're probably going to have to play Detroit regardless. And whatever. To me, the main thing about the top 4 seed is you get home court in the first round and then, see where it lands. But wouldn't you say that given that you probably do want the 2 seed, isn't it incumbent upon him now? Look, we give him some grace in the Sohan thing because Sohan just got here and, you need to play him a little bit. That not only are you experimenting, but that the experiments you're doing are more fleshed out, more well thought out, more cohesive, and more conducive to the actual goal of we're trying to win basketball games. I think we're at that point in the season where it can't just be, well, he's experimenting. And so I understand that. I think it needs to be, okay, he's experimenting, but now I need to see the fruits of your labor. And now I need to understand each lineup that you put out there that is with some depth piece or with a combination we don't normally see. It needs to also just make sense on the surface itself. And I need to kind of be able to easily see what the end goal is.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with that. And this is why I didn't give him an A, or I think I gave him a lower grade than you last time we were talking, because I think he's met expectations. Right, we were we're tied in third right now. We knew that this was before the season. I'll fully admit I thought 60 wins was on the table, but I think you had said this, and most Knicks fans would have agreed that the reason for the change was to make sure that you take some hits in the regular season compared to Tibbs maybe, but you're better prepared to deploy the versatility you talked about in the playoffs. But absolutely, at this point of the season, like the next game will be the 60th game. So it's not it's to your point, like, yeah, you do want to make sure you solidify your standings. Like, there's not a whole lot of season left, but also now you do want to start getting the players comfortable, right? You had said, I think, before the season, that when you're trying new things, more up tempo, getting Jalen off ball, there's going to be some growing pains. Now is the time where you need to start to say, okay, we've had the growing pains, but we need this show needs to be, full speed, go ahead by the time we hit the playoffs, right? Because the first, there's an argument that 4 might be a better seeding, because right as it stands, you would get the Raptors in the first round, as opposed to I know you don't buy Embiid, and Embiid doesn't look like the same player, frankly, but the Sixers have playoff experience. I would probably say I'd be a little bit more worried about facing the Sixers than the Raptors, who the Knicks have generally matched up really well with, and the Raptors struggle to exploit some of the issues in the Knicks defense. They have size, but they're not athletic the same way that maybe the Pistons or KC are. So, or even a team like the Magic. But leaving that aside, you should still be now kind of focused, and you need to start. You need to start getting in the mindset of playoff level preparation, right? It's February. I think February, January are kind of the dog days, right? That's why the All-Star break comes at this time. But after the All-Star break is when you need to start ramping up and saying, all right, we're getting ready for the playoffs. And there's been too many uneven performances from the coach and from it's fair to call out Brunson at this point. And I think there's a couple things that I'd be worried about. One, when it comes to Cat, he should play in the post more. But the fact that we have Cat and 5 out is really diminished, even when teams are not putting a wing on Cat, even when they're putting a big, when you can never find him as a pop on the pop, and that's something that, I know it's, Brunson isn't as tall, maybe not the most intuitive read for him, and he might prefer playing with a roller. But it's been almost 2 seasons now. And if Tibbs wasn't emphasizing it, or if they didn't have the opportunities because they weren't going 5 out last season, or teams were hiding a wing on Cat, that's fine.
And to the point you're making here about 5 out, look, I love Josh Hart. Josh Hart's great. I think that some of the criticism he gets last year, this year is not, it's not even really his fault, right? It's more about the coach. And that's where I come back to, like, I watched the game yesterday, and it's like, you're giving them the opportunity to simply, like, even Novak brought it up on the broadcast where he's like, Cat's drawing a lot of attention. They're showing him a lot of bodies. And why are they able to show him a lot of bodies? Because teams are comfortable letting Josh Hart, do whatever. And look, Hart has to shoot the threes when he's open. He didn't do that consistently yesterday. He hasn't done it consistently in a few games now. And that's fine. But
yesterday? I thought Ariel Pacheco said he took 8 yesterday. But maybe
whatever it was, I don't know.
But he definitely passed up a lot of open ones. And if your offense is getting to the point where they're able to force 8 Josh Hart threes, that's a trade-off. Even with him shooting 39% this year, that's a trade-off most defenses will take, right?
I just think it's all intertwined. Like, I don't think you can divorce, like, Cat isn't Cat. We need to get Cat more touches from the lineups you're playing him in, and how teams are defending him. And yes, can guys individually do better? Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it. Brunson can play better, but I also think some of the issues that we're seeing Brunson have they're not independent of everything else, right? That's not how basketball works. And
right, but I think some of it is calling out, right? He should be able to hit Cat on a pop, right? That's after he
should, but I'm also saying you don't get to that consistently, because if a team is defending Cat, as we see teams do all the time with a wing, they're very comfortable. Okay, you run a pick and pop with Brunson and Cat. Okay, we're just gonna switch it. We'll just switch it, and there's no, and like, look, Brunson is obviously such a great scorer that might be enough, because he can just, I have a mismatch I like now, and that's enough. But if you're not challenging teams, you're like, I guess the way I put it is, I think Mike Brown has done a lot of good things, And I do think that he clearly, just looking at the Knicks shot distribution, he's clearly put more of an emphasis on like we need to get threes up, and we value that a lot. The Knicks also have the highest percentage of corner threes, I believe, in the league still, of their total 3-point attempts. But like, you're still not fully getting everything you can get out of it because you're giving these teams the bailout so often of heart on the floor. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I don't have a single fucking issue with that lineup being a lineup, the lineup being the starters. Like that has to be a lineup that you play at various points. I don't even mind them starting at this point. And Mike Brown has been more willing to mix and match and pull these guys out than Tibbs was, right? It's very obvious if you just look at the lineup data, you can kind of see how many more combinations he's tried. But you're still not getting 5-out Karl Anthony Towns lineups consistently. And more concerning to me is you're not getting 5-out lineups with Brunson and Cat on the floor consistently. And that is like, I don't know what your best lineup is on aggregate. I could not tell you that. I think that's actually a lot more debatable than people would like it to be.
It's
but I
opponent
promise
dependent
you,
too, right?
your best offensive lineup is going to be Jalen Brunson, point guard, Karl Anthony Towns center, spread the floor out and see what happens.
So what would you attribute the fact that lineup, and Deuce certainly seems to qualify, and he gives you, I would still say, as improved as Hart is, I would still say Deuce gives you better point of attack defense, which is something you always will need next to Brunson. What would you attribute the fact that, only 91 minutes, but that lineup has a negative net rating this year?
I think 91 minutes is such a small sample that I don't know.
That's a couple hundred.
And I've said this before, I don't think it's a guarantee it's their best lineup, but I don't think it's a guarantee that it's a negative lineup either just because of 91 minutes. And Deuce has had injury issues, and the Knicks have had injury issues throughout the year with various guys missing at various points. So I don't think it's all just because Mike Brown's choosing not to do stuff. But ultimately, it is on him to find more minutes. And look, whatever. Some of the minutes with Cat at the 5, when he's with Alvarado on the bench, or with Alvarado coming off the bench, and those are more true 5-out lineups at times. That's fine. That's good. I think that's valuable. But you're still, like, again, you played. I would have to go look at it through the game yesterday. I'm pretty sure last night they did not play a single actual 5-out lineup until the fourth quarter, maybe. I don't think they did in the first 3 quarters. I know they didn't against Houston. I know they didn't against Chicago at all, I don't think. I don't remember the Pistons game clearly enough, but I want to say that they didn't do it much. And again, I hate, like, because I don't believe that you have to be 5-out all the time, but I do think it needs to be a consistent component of your attack. And part of that component needs to involve minutes where Jalen Brunson is on the floor with Karl Anthony Towns at the 5, with a lineup where everybody is a credible shooter. And if that isn't happening consistently, I think you are just leaving such a weapon on the table. You are just leaving what should be a weapon on the table. And maybe the biggest criticism I have of it for not doing it this year is Cat has played good on defense this year. He's been a good defender this year. I think I want to say he's in the 86th percentile in EPM on defense this season. I'll look it up after I finish talking here. He's been a good defender. Do I think he's the best defender in the world? No. Do I think he's actually in the 86th percentile of defensive players in the league? No. But he has been good on defense this year. He has not been a sieve. And Mike Brown does deserve credit for that because he's not playing him in drop as much anymore, playing him more at the level, playing him higher up the floor in coverages where he's better at. But he's been a better defender this year. And that should then encourage you to kind of not necessarily, not feel like, oh, I need this guy who plays really good defense, but maybe leave something on the table offensively to accommodate Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. Like, I just think I think Mike Brown really needs to take stock of what has happened through 59 games so far what he's tried, what he's experimented with, what's worked and what's not, and clean things up in these final 23 games and strip out the stuff that, you know, either hasn't worked or doesn't really serve a purpose. Um, and start being a little bit more ruthless with like, hey, you're not going to play. Yeah, this lineup isn't going to see time. Like, it just needs to happen. And there's always a push and pull, and I understand that I don't know the politics of the locker room. I also don't know, um, it seems they've clearly made a conscious effort of lowering the minutes for all these starters. So that's a difficulty in and of itself, right? How do you lower minutes without giving, some of your depth pieces more time on the floor than maybe you will in the playoffs? Who can say all these things? I think that does need to be taken into consideration, and I'm appreciative of that. But from what we've seen, again, since the All-Star break, like, I just haven't loved it. And, I don't, the idea that Mike Brown's been like a failure, or that everything that's happened this year is a failure, and, like, it has not improved anything, and they should have just kept Tibbs, and all that shit is nonsense to me. But I'll throw this to you. This has been a thought I had in my brain basically since they made the Alvarado trade. I think you would agree, and most people would agree, that the Indiana Pacers last year, you wouldn't look at their roster and been like, man, this is a fucking stacked roster, right? I don't think you would say that.
Yes and no. I think before the season I wouldn't have, but I do think, and maybe it's chicken and the egg, right? Is it because they out maximize them? But Siakam really has proven to be a pretty important, strong piece for them.
Of course, but would you look at that team and be like, holy shit, this is like an overwhelming amount of talent?
No, I would not have. If you told me they would have been in Game 7 and potentially would have won, maybe if Halliburton didn't get hurt, I wouldn't have believed you. I didn't think that had that.
So, and I agree with that. And I think a large reason that they got as far as they did and all that stuff is Rick Carlisle. You talk about experimenting. Experimenting is great. He's great at experimenting, but he's really great at getting, extracting the pearl from the experiments, understanding what actually works here, what's the kernel of truth I'm trying to extract, and then using that and calling on it in the right moments, right? He pushes the buttons at the right moments, the right buttons at the right moments. And my thought after they made the Alvarado trade, and you've seen it for a few games and whatever, has been like, I feel like if you told me Rick Carlisle was our head coach, I would feel super fucking confident that this team would come out of the East. I'd feel really confident about this team coming out of the East. And we won't know this until we get into the playoffs and we see what unfolds. I don't have that level of confidence in Mike Brown because I haven't seen it, obviously. I mean, that's no shit. Like, I haven't seen it, but and Carlisle is one of the best, right? He's been one of the best for years in terms of in-game, in-series tweaks, adjustments, management, all those type of things. I don't know that Mike Brown will press the right buttons. I don't know that sometimes he knows what the right button is or when to press it. Is that a regular season issue where he's more willing to extend minutes to something that isn't working in to like the greater cause of accumulating data and information? Maybe that's possible. I'm sure that there are Pacers fans that would tell us that Rick Carlisle has not always pressed the right buttons in the regular season, maybe given too many minutes to XYZ thing. And then come playoff time, he's able to tighten it up, and all of a sudden you're seeing the value of all the information you've gleaned. Maybe Mike Brown's going to do that. I don't know, because I don't know. And that is ultimately where my biggest trepidation comes from with him, is not so much, like, I think he deserves credit for experimenting. We won't know how much credit to really give him until we get into the playoffs and see how he uses all this information that he's collected. And I will say, maybe even now, but maybe it's even before the playoffs, I think we need to start seeing that in these final 23 games where it's like, okay, look, you've had basically 3/4 of the season now to, try all the things that you wanted to try, work in all the pieces that you wanted to work in. I know the Knicks added Alvarado and Sohan at the deadline. I feel like Alvarado is a pretty easy plug and play type guy. You kind of know where his minutes and combinations would be. Um, Sohan was an interesting flyer. I don't think that we need to necessarily see much more of it. Um, but it's time now. Like it's time. You've had 60 games basically with these pieces. It's time to start trimming the fat and, playing and playing the things that work, playing to your strengths more, playing to the strengths of individual players and lineups more. That's where I kind of fall. I think we're at that point of the season where it's okay. It was cute. Let's tighten up the ship now.
Yeah, and that's yeah. Can you push the right buttons at the right time? I wrote this piece a long time ago about exploration versus exploitation, and Tibbs kind of leaning very much to this is what I believe and this is what I know, and sticking to that strip, and maybe losing opportunities to get more data. But now that you have data, even if you bring in a guy like Sohan, you should have an idea, given what you've seen from Diawara, and even Huckporty, right, with other bigs, how you want to use them, and OG, right? Like it shouldn't be this. It's not a completely brand new player, and there's film on him and all that. And maybe there's a desire to try some different things, but that's just one example, right? Um, I think post All-Star, yeah, like that Detroit game, I don't put as much stock into Detroit missing Stewart and Duran, but the game plan should have been pretty much the same either way. One thing that I haven't seen that much of is, and especially last night, I was surprised we didn't see much of it at all. And I think Ariel Pacheco mentioned this on Twitter as well. What really worked and what really helped loosen up the Cavs defense when we played them in the playoffs a couple of years ago was Hart screening for Brunson. This is also why it was very frustrating when Grimes got hurt and they were playing Hart, RJ Randall, because that really constrained the spacing beyond a point. But, you know, um, when we were screening with Mitch or we were screening with Hartenstein, it would bring Allen to the ball, which was very uncomfortable for Brunson, right? Because you're either living with step backs or, Allen can recover if you get to the rim, and you're asking Brunson to be a heroic shot maker. And that's what really happened in that game, too. If you remember, like parts of game one and game two, they were running a lot of pick and roll with the big. And they went away from that. And the rest of the series was pretty comfortable. That's how they were able to, because Josh Hart is capable of being an outlet and getting downhill 4-on-3, making plays. If you switch that, then you're putting someone else who's not a very capable defender on Brunson, and it's a much more favorable matchup than Allen, right? And I understand you don't have to spam that, but that is something that we just didn't see much of at all, right? And guard screens, I would say, is also how it would go, especially if Detroit is going to put Osar. I'd rather have Brunson attacking a guy like Cade, right? I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Cade's defense. I know it's improved, but there are ways to just not have Brunson have to deal with Osar all the time. If they're playing Duncan Robinson, that's a guy you should be attacking all the time, especially against that team. So we haven't seen the opponent-specific stuff. And that's fine. You say, okay, but we should start to see it a little bit more. Obviously, in the second half against Houston, the fourth quarter especially, you saw them start to do more of that. You go 5 out, lean on that. But we haven't seen those adjustments in this kind of a format as you would like. So we've gathered the data. We've gotten them some comfort playing in different styles. Now you need to start to act on it. But I think the worry also would be, this just might be like, you have all of this fancy offense, right? Like, you have more diverse sets. You're getting Brunson off ball. But without a reliable secondary perimeter creator, is there a ceiling on that? Because good defenses will switch. And if that's just, and if Brunson isn't the kind of mover like Halliburton who can still make sure that like it's not going to devolve into an ISO, and if you don't have another guy, like the Pacers also have other ball handlers, we don't really, that's probably the other reason why he plays in that lineup is that, he is a more effective secondary creator than Bridges. I think someone mentioned on the court, like the thing with the 5-out lineup is you are kind of asking Bridges or Cat, both of them have some shortcomings in this area, to create shots from the perimeter. And with Cat not having the same burst maybe this year, that also, just beating a big off the dribble from the perimeter isn't as viable option. So if it at the end of the day just comes down to they're going to have to rely on Brunson to be the ISO, to be an ISO god in the playoffs, that would be the real worry, because the other part of it is teams, even if Brunson is cooking, teams will be increasingly more willing to switch and to live with Brunson ISOs, even if he's killing them from mid range, because that efficiency is still not going to be as good as the optimized Knicks shot chart. One, and two, the Knicks are not the last time the Knicks really could have followed that formula to go all the way was that 2 years ago, right? Where if they don't have all those injuries, there's a good chance that I think they were a better team than the Pacers that year. That's not to take away from the Pacers' victory, but it went 7 with the Knicks falling apart. No Mitch, Hart got hurt.
And the Pacers were worse that year than they were last year.
Yeah, and then maybe you don't beat Boston, but that was also a Knicks team that played very tough defense until they really fell apart at the end against. Like they played good defense, or they were a formidable defensive team, so you could win that way. Now you've mentioned this a bunch. You have to win. The Knicks have to be effective on offense, and it spirals too, because the more shots they miss, the more other teams can get into transition, and that magnifies the athleticism gap they have with some of these teams. So that it would be the real worry, that at the end of the day, despite the moves you made to upgrade the offensive talent, at the end of the day, if they're still going to have to be Brunson ISO reliant in the playoffs, it really lowers the ceiling of the team. And that could be related to his reads, that could be related to Mike Brown, but that also could just be fundamentally a product of the personnel, that teams will switch. You don't have reliable secondary perimeter creators, and you don't have the kind of defense that could support an ISO heavy Brunson approach.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, I think the Knicks' lack of another guy to put pressure on the rim consistently has been an issue. I think also on top of that, like they don't have guys that get to the rim quick on closeouts. The guy that does it the best is Hart, but teams sit on that, right? Like, you see it with, I think Cleveland always plays him well. And I didn't think he was the most problematic guy yesterday for the Knicks, or that he was singularly responsible for the loss, but you could see it yesterday that they know how to play him. Like, there was one closeout. I think it was Cat. I think Alvarado got it out to Cat at the top of the key. He swings it to Hart in the right corner. This was in the second quarter, I believe. And Mobley, who was kind of in the, he's basically the low man, he kind of closes out to Hart, but he realizes it's Hart. So he doesn't really close out to him. He just kind of takes he's probably a full step or two away from Josh Hart. Hart does a pump fake and then drives in the lane, but Mobley is able to kind of shadow him, and the Knicks don't get a good shot out of it. So the fact that teams aren't honoring him as a shooter, it neutralizes his ability to attack closeouts, even though he's the best guy the Knicks have at doing that. OG's good at attacking closeouts, but he's not super fast with his decision making or process. And Mikal Bridges he's not half the time the guy attacks the closeout, he just takes him to a mid-range jumper, right? Like, they don't have that other guy to take advantage of when teams tilt their defenders, their defense in general, towards Brunson or Cat. And then you swing it to the second side. You don't have that guy that's consistently able to attack a closeout, right? It feels, and that I think is why the Knicks are so dependent at times on their 3-point shooting, especially from OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. Like, those guys need to hit their threes, because they're also not going to be the most dynamic second side kind of attackers. And that's just a problem with the team they have. That's just a deficiency of the roster. There's really no other way to put it. Other ways to work around it? Yeah, I mean, most of the ways to work around it are hit fucking threes, right? Like, that's most of the way to attack that issue. If they don't do that, I don't know what to tell you. So, um, yeah, we'll see. But you know, I, I think it's important not to get too crazy negatively with this team. Like, I didn't come away from the game yesterday feeling demoralized or distraught over, oh, what does this mean? Is this a terrible matchup for them? Why, are they even capable of beating good teams? I don't, I don't buy that. I don't believe that because I've seen them beat good teams this year alone, right? So I think that most of that is nonsense. Um, but they are look. This stretch here is going to prove it. It's going to be everything that if you have a positive view on this team, it will be confirmed, or maybe you'll change your mind after the stretch. If you have a negative view on the team, it could be confirmed or it could be turned around by this stretch. You're playing the cream of the crop in the league, basically, coming up here. So um, they've got it all to prove, and that's players, that's coaches, that's both sides of it. So we'll see. I will say I do think that they really do miss Deuce McBride, and that's not to say that that's an excuse for the struggles they have had or whatever, but, um, you know, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges have struggled with three ball lately. Brunson and Cat, they're not the same type of 3-point shooters in the sense of teams are trying to scheme those guys out. So, Bridges and Anunoby, it becomes imperative that they hit their shots to kind of change that equation. If they're not hitting their shots, it hurts you a lot. Shamit has been he's been really good for them, but that's one guy. Like I just think when you lose Deuce, there's a difference between kind of having three wing shooters in Shamit, OG Mikel versus having that fourth one available to you as well. And not having that other option, I think is hurting them a bit. Um, but look, the Knicks got some good shots yesterday. It's got to be said. OG had some good looks. Mikal Bridges had some good looks. Brunson had some good looks. Josh Hart definitely had some good looks. Shamit missed some good looks. Alvarado missed a couple good looks. Like sometimes it really is just simple as make or miss, but you know, you also want to. It didn't feel like a game where there was an onslaught of, oh wow, we created so many good looks and nothing went in. It's just like that sometimes. Like it did feel it was choppier, it was messier, it wasn't clean. And that's kind of how it's felt, right? Since the All-Star break. It feels like they have stretches and quarters where you're like, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like, and this is what it's supposed to feel like. Um, but that consistency quarter to quarter, game to game has not been there. And at times it feels like they're searching for something. I don't know what it is, but they are almost searching to find a rhythm, a collective rhythm to their play, and it hasn't been there. Um, is that just part of the regular season? Could be. I mean, look, it was our fourth game in 6 nights, so it's not necessarily the easiest thing. We know that they got into Chicago late after playing Houston on Saturday night. Obviously, all these things add up, but you're, it's tough to see. And like, look, to get into it a little bit more, like, I do think the Josh Hart thing is an interesting conversation because broadly, I don't have a problem with him starting at this point. I think he's fine. I think that starting lineup's net rating has been good. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But there are certain teams and opponents that give him problems. I think he's been bad against Detroit. I think he's been bad against Cleveland. Very specifically, those two teams, they do a really good job of neutralizing him. And I think part of the reason is Boston has a similar game plan where they're very good about, we understand what Josh Hart is. We'll give him a three. If he wants to shoot three, great. But we're not going to close out hard to him. And when we close out to him, we're closing out short. So if he decides to put the ball on the deck, um, we're right there and we're not giving him a free run at the rim. But they're not a big team, right? They're not a big team. They're not the most athletic team. And so I think he can still have a positive impact and thrive even in games against Boston. I don't feel that way against Cleveland or against Detroit. He's got to shoot threes. He has to. He has to. Because when he puts the ball on the deck and he tries to get to the rim, those teams have too much size, um, and they're too well disciplined, I think, for him to capitalize on it the way he does against Boston, who has the discipline, but not necessarily the personnel to really kind of put the clamps on him. But you saw it against Detroit. I mean, the first game out of the All-Star break, I think it was very evident that he cannot impact the game as a slasher in that series the way that not in the half court anyway, that he can when you're playing lesser competition, right? I mean, against Chicago, he might have been our best one of our I think he was at least our second best player in that game, right? Cat was the best and Hart was second best, but it's like, okay, but you're playing Chicago. And so there's a lot of value to Josh Hart, and I think in the playoffs he can have value too. But there are certain matchups that I definitely worry about him in. Cleveland being one, Detroit another. Those are two teams. I mean, look, if the playoffs started today, you wouldn't face Cleveland or Detroit until the conference finals potentially. But there's a world, right, where the Knicks finish 2 and the Cavs finish 3, or the Cavs finish 2, the Knicks finish 3, and then you're looking at a path where it's like you got to play Cleveland round 2, you got to play Detroit potentially in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like it's not it's something to consider. And if there's a I do think I mean not I think we kind of know this, right? That there is like a political reason for Josh Hart starting. I think that's evident and self-evident. Um, and Mike Brown deserves credit for not closing with him against Houston. That's like actually a really, really positive sign to see because that's not something we ever saw Tibbs do, right? When Josh was healthy, Josh closed every fucking game. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So Mike Brown being able to not have the understanding of what was occurring in the game and then having the wherewithal and the courage, I guess, to not put him back in, that's a credit to him. Can you do that consistently when the situation calls for it, when the opponent calls for it? I think that's a big swing factor for the Knicks. And the other one is Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson was really good yesterday on the offensive side of the ball, offensive glass, everything. Defensively, since the All-Star break, he's not quite been there. Even yesterday, I didn't think was his best defensive showing. I'm less concerned about that because I do think he is slowly. Look, I think a week off for him probably hurts more than it hurts for most guys, just because he feels like he needs to stay in a. It feels like he's somebody who needs to stay in a rhythm of playing games, playing games, playing games. Which is funny to say, given durability is his biggest concern. But yeah, I just think that those two guys to me are I'm keeping an eye out on them as far as how the season progresses from here on out and then against certain opponents. Like even Mitch, he was really bad against Houston. Now some of that again, I think he was knocking the rust off, but he hasn't been particularly effective in the Detroit matchups that he's played. He was not particularly great against Houston. I mean, he was bad against Houston, quite honestly. He didn't play Chicago. He was better last night. Nothing great. And he has dominated Cleveland before, so I don't really know that that's a concern. But it feels like there's certain matchups for him this year where he can be neutralized or maybe not as impactful. And then with Josh Hart, obviously, the ones that I outlined. I don't know. Those two guys are so key to the Knicks in so many ways that I feel like it's just something I'm like, in the back of my mind, I kind of have these thoughts on them that I'm like monitoring.
Yeah, and with Mitch, it's always a million different things, right? It could be conditioning, how he's feeling that day or whatever, right? I'll throw this back at you though. If switching becomes something that 5 out the teams can do against 5 out, particularly when Hart is on the floor. But even if you go with a true 5 out lineup, and if a team like Detroit or Cleveland can switch that pretty comfortably, is maybe that's the highest ceiling version of this team. But in those games you mentioned, sometimes you just got to hit threes, and sometimes you're not generating always the best looks. And frankly, the Knicks have a bunch of people who can shoot, but they don't have too many elite shooters, especially this year with Cat struggling from three. Brunson is still probably their best shooter. OG and Mikal are not really movement guys, and OG in particular doesn't have the quickest release. Deuce is out right now. You wonder, is maybe the best way, the most consistent way that they should be attacking these teams double big, because you get some rim protection. And as much as you mentioned, Mitch can be neutralized. Even when he's neutralized on the glass, it should open up things you can exploit, right? Because if they have to dedicate multiple bodies, that opens it up for a guy like Josh Hart to crash. If they're opening up using multiple bodies on him, it should slow down transition efforts. So that there are pluses you get, and they can still crush teams on the offensive glass. In those kinds of series where teams seem to have answers for 5 out or for the lineup with Hart, do you see that maybe being the lineup they should be playing the most, especially once it's not Mitch on the minutes restriction as much anymore, and even if they don't start, playing Cat and Mitch a lot together to kind of to mitigate with if you can't have elite efficiency on offense, you're winning the possession battle on the glass. More ISO maybe, but that reduces turnovers. And winning that way, right? Is that something you think we'll see more of, or should see more of, as the playoffs come?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so essentially, we were talking about when they go 5 out or even Hart with the starters, right? You got to make threes, which is a high variance proposition, and it can get into ISO, which reduces your efficiency compared to some of the beautiful offense and ball movement that we've seen. Against teams that can get the Knicks into that mode, would you say maybe even more than true 5 out, the real answer is double big? Because then even if you're going ISO a lot with Brunson, that's limiting turnovers. You should win the possession battle because Mitch and Cat can dominate on the offensive glass, and it reduces transition efficiency, even if teams are neutralizing Mitch by dedicating multiple bodies.
I think it just depends on the matchup, really. There are matchups where the double big thing I think could be. I thought yesterday was one where you probably could have used double big more. It's also hard, right? Mitch is clearly on a minutes limit, and they're trying to cut. They want to keep Cat's minutes, I think, where they are. I think he's playing like 31 and a half minutes per game this season. So it's a nice little reduction for him from last year. So you're probably just not going to see that much into the playoffs. But yeah, I definitely think there's worlds or scenarios probably that are word to use there. Scenarios where using the double big is a good solution. But I don't, and this is where it is tricky for Mike Brown, and probably where all of us should give him some grace in general, especially because I think he's been more willing than Tibbs was in this regard. Is this team is really good. They're very talented, but they don't have a closing five that I think you look at and are like, it doesn't matter who we play, it doesn't matter what their strengths are. This lineup is our best lineup no matter what. I don't think they have a lineup like that. What I do think they have are options, and it's about picking the right options. There are games where you can 100% tell me that your best closing lineup is going to involve Cat and Mitchell Robinson in the front court together, right? I can see that. 100%. I can think there are matchups against that. You could maybe that's against Detroit. I don't fully buy that. I think you're kind of playing into Detroit's strengths if you do that. But maybe it's against Detroit. Maybe it's against Boston, right? Because Mitchell Robinson completely fries Joe Mazzulla's brain. Maybe it's against Cleveland because if they're going to have Allen and Mobley on the floor together, you can capitalize on that in some ways, right? Oh, you're going to have Allen and Mobley on the floor together, so we can get away with having our double big and maybe having a little less mobility. And guess what? I like our double bigs more than your double bigs. So there are matchups where maybe that's your best one. There are other matchups like against Houston where, hey, guess what? Maybe it's not double big, and maybe it's not Josh Hart, maybe it's not Mikal Bridges, whoever, maybe it's going to be Alvarado and Shaman. And maybe there are going to be nights where it's Deuce and somebody else. And I think that is where it is tricky for Mike Brown. But where he also deserves some credit is he's been more
It's
willing.
tricky to rock it around.
Sorry, say it again.
It's tricky to rock it around, to rock it around, to rock it around. It's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. But it's, he deserves some credit for being more willing to call different guys number and to roll with different lineups. That's clearly, not clearly, I mean, it's definitely what one of our main criticisms of Tibbs was, not just last year, but consistently, where it's like, hey, you got fucking 10 guys here that you can use. You don't need to close the same five all the time. Um, and Mike Brown has been less beholden to any five-man lineup to close games anyway. But is he going to do that consistently? And I think to the point you're making, more than just closing in playoff games, more so than in the regular season, it's a 48-minute game. All 48 minutes matter. And so it can't just be like, well, I know what our best five is going to be to close the game. So I just need to work my rotations to get to that point where it's like, yeah, but like if you're putting yourself in a deficit, in the middle of the second quarter, because you're saving the minutes for this group until the fourth, there are all kinds of things that he's going to have to figure out. And
the margins are
ultimately,
super thin to that point, right? Like, I think that game 6 against Miami, the Knicks were up, I think, 14 points, and then Brunson goes to the bench.
God.
That stretch arguably lost the Knicks the game. And this is not a Tibbs hate thing, because Brunson had to sit at some point, right? And there's other things. We don't need to relitigate that series, but the point is a very small stretch can swing a game. So the margin for error is razor thin.
Yeah. And so, they've got to figure out. I mean, to the point, like this is an interesting stat. So let's pull it up. This is from Nikias Duncan on Twitter. Some numbers from last night in the Cleveland and Knicks game. Brunson saw switches on nearly 49% of his pick and rolls, third highest of any high volume game, 30 pick and rolls for him this year. 0.52 points per possession on Brunson pick and rolls. Second lowest in a game. He had 0.5 on 5 pick and rolls versus Sacramento on January 14th. And only five shot attempts and 43 total touches for Cat last night. This is something the Knicks have to figure out. Switching defenses cannot be a automatic, well, we can't get the ball to Cat here. It's on Cat, but it's also on the fucking team, man. Like, I'm so sick and tired of every time Cat having a problem, and it just becomes about, well, Cat's got to do this. Okay, well, what are you doing to help Cat? Because I think he's taken enough bullets for anytime the Knicks have a fucking bad game or bad stretch, it's all about Karl-Anthony Towns and what he's not doing or what he is doing that's bad. And okay, but last night to me that was a coaching and a Brunson issue, because it did not come out in the third quarter like they had any plan or coherent thought out process to get Cat involved, despite the fact that Cat was pretty easily their best source of offense in the first half. I mean, forget the fact that he was perfect from the field. He also had some really nice passes out of times where he's putting the ball on the floor. He had one where he dimed up Mitch underneath the hoop. He had another one for Josh Hart when he was driving and he hit him on a cut. Like, he played a good game. He was playing under control. And I just think, I know, like, you cannot win like this. You cannot win if your second best player can just be taken out of the game to the degree that we've seen at times this year. You cannot have stretches of games where he's just non-involved. He's a non-factor. Like, that's unacceptable. And again, it falls on Jalen Brunson. It falls on Mike Brown. They've got to be better. And a lot of ink has been spilt on how Karl-Anthony Towns, he's not living up to this. He's not doing that thing. He's not doing this thing. But I will say, and I've been here consistently, like, I don't think that enough is being done to get him going at times either. And I don't think the Knicks are fully capitalizing on the benefit of just him being on the floor. Because when he's on the floor, he does change the geometry, he does change the way defenses have to operate. And part of that, again, it's all tied together. We talked about the Josh Hart piece of it. Like, these are the things that you need to figure out in the last 23 games of the season, is how do we not allow teams to simply take things away and force us into what they want to force us into. That is definitely a thing. And also needs to be said, I think Brunson's having probably it feels like his choppiest season anyway, in terms of even when he gets switches that he wants potentially, that he's not really able to attack it in a way that I feel like we've seen from him in previous years.
Yeah, and it's been a longer extended stretch of, I think, early season you usually see that from him. It takes him a couple of months till it becomes lights out Brunson. But you're right. I don't know if it's, if they're making his reads more complex, even in ISOs, if he's trying to do more things. But you would like to see that ramped back up to what we're used to, hopefully within the next month or so.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I just it's not been a great stretch here for Brunson. If I'm going to be honest, like if you look at his numbers since turn of the year, so this is from Knicks played their first game in 2016 on January 2nd. His numbers since then: 23.4 points, 5.6 assists. He's shooting 45.5% from the field, 35% from three.
Would you expect some of that to just eventually be regression to the mean?
I mean, I hope so, because I don't think he's been very good these last 2 months.
I mean, do you think it's a systemic thing, or is he just missing shots?
I think there's some systemic stuff which I touched on. I don't know that Mike Brown has done him a lot of favors with some of especially the non-cat lineups. I feel like he's doing some tip stuff where it's like, well, I can have bad spacing and Brunson will figure it out. Which, like, okay, yeah, I mean, he can figure it out. We've seen him do it before. I don't know that that's really a effective solution. Certainly not against the best teams in the league. But okay, fine. But even adjusting for that, I don't think he's been good. Like, I don't like his process. I don't like the way he's approaching games at times. And like I said, like it feels like he's veering sometimes between I got to be aggressive, and then it's like, I did a bad job of getting guys involved. And then all of a sudden he comes out the next game and it's like, I'm not going to look at the hoop for the entire first quarter. And it's, neither of those is particularly what you want, right? You don't want him to because it's like ultimately he ends up getting 20 shots up a game, basically. But it's like, I don't want him to be like getting 20 shots up in 2.5 quarters. And then the other 1.5 quarters, he's just like playing like fucking Tyus Jones or something. I don't know. I just think his process right now, he has stretches like this before. We saw it last year. I criticized him for it at the time last year, where it's like he's, he doesn't seem to be comfortable right now even taking pull-up threes, which is something I think that is interesting. But then he starts probing into the paint, and it feels like he doesn't know what he wants to do when he gets inside the paint. It's kind of like, oh, I'm gonna try to get to the rim, but then I don't like that, so I'm going to try and spin away, and then I guess I'll try to create something in the mid-range, and actually, and then it's like, oh, there's 3 seconds left of the shot clock, I got to do something. It's a lot of possessions like that. I think he's playing slower right now too than he has. I mean, one thing to come, like if you watch back the Houston game on Saturday night, the Knicks got off to a really good start. One of the keys to that start, yes, they generated turnovers, but even when they weren't generating turnovers, they were getting the ball up the floor fast. They were getting up the ball. They were advancing the ball up the floor fast. And then as the game went on, it's kind of slowed down. Obviously, Houston has something to do with that. They're really one of the best defenses in the league. But there was but the Knicks also just kind of accepted it. And Brunson kind of just, he almost leaned into it. It just got slower and slower and slower. And yesterday felt the same way. It's like, first quarter, but the Knicks scored 26 points. I think if they had there's a world where they could have had 30 plus easily. Like the shooting was just bad across the board. But the offense was fine to start the game. But then as it goes on, and it's like the start of the second half, it's just like, put a bullet in my head. You're just walking the ball up the floor, and it's like this fucking slog to even get into possessions. There were a couple possessions where they didn't get into anything until there was 11 seconds on the floor. There are a few zero pass possessions from Brunson. These are just bad possessions, and there's nothing happening. There's no flow. Nobody's involved. It looked very disorganized. And, ultimately, like, yeah, there are nights where Brunson can pull that off because he's such a talented shot maker, but that's a tough place to live, man. That's not where you want to be consistently. And I just think over these last couple of months, too consistently, we are seeing those type of possessions much more often. And I don't know what to make of that. You have to credit opponents. Like, I'm sure opponents have picked up on things the Knicks were doing, over the first however many games of the season and have adjusted. And maybe, part of this is the Knicks have to counter, but like, I also don't, Brunson's not doing himself or the team any favors, I don't think, with his approach to some of these games. And I think it's too methodical and it's too slow. And, what I guess what I will say is this is Mike Brown seems comfortable and has been comfortable at times calling out other players, very specifically Karl Anthony Towns in the media. He's been very comfortable challenging him publicly in ways that I maybe don't love the frequency of, but I also think, look, maybe you've tried everything behind closed doors and then you think this is the one way to motivate a guy. I don't know. That's possible. I don't hate it as a motivational tool, just not as frequently as he's done it. But I would be fine with him saying something about Jalen Brunson, other than that he's our best player and I trust him, and I'm always going to trust him. Yeah, we know that you're always going to trust him in crunch time situations. We know he's our best player, but I think the bar should be higher for him. Quite honestly, like, if I'm going to be honest, like, I think Jalen Brunson will be a third-team All-NBA player this year, and that, it's kind of crazy to say this given our expectations when we initially signed him, probably, but like, that is disappointing to me. That's very disappointing to me. I mean, I know you don't fucking like it, but like, I'm sorry, there's actually no fucking argument for him to make a team, like, to be selected over Cade Cunningham in an All NBA discussion right now. There's none. There's like, I think he's a better player than Maxey. I don't know that he's had a better regular season than Tyrese Maxey this year. I think he's a better player than Donovan Mitchell. When the chips are down, I'm always going to take Jalen Brunson over Donovan Mitchell. He has not a better regular season than Donovan Mitchell. Like, and these are players that I think he's better than, but he has not performed to that level this season, and that's disappointing to me. And that's not all on Mike Brown. That's not on Karl Anthony Towns doing XYZ thing. That's not all on Josh Hart. He doesn't space the floor. That's not all on Mikal Bridges doesn't play with enough physicality or any of this shit. Like, if Jalen Brunson's as good as we think he is, then he should be able to fucking do that shit. And he should be able to be that great when things are not ideal and not optimized and not perfect. And he's done that so many times and so often as a New York Knick. And this season has been kind of disappointing from him in that regard. I've not felt that this year. I have not felt that he has delivered in the capacity that I know he is capable of and that he has shown himself to be capable of in the past. So, look, I don't know what these last 2 months have been. They've not been great for him. Do I think they accurately capture who he is or what he is as a player at his best? No, obviously not. And I fully expect that he will play better than what he has. But it's got to start at some point. Like, 2 months is not a short period of time. That's, I think that's, I'll look it up right now. I have it pulled up. That is 24 games. They got 23 games left in the season. That's over a quarter of the season that he's played like this. Where, again, it's not horrible, right? 23 and a half, 5.5 assists on 45 and a half, 35, 84 and a half splits. That's not like some garbage player. But do you really think that's some tremendous All-NBA production? I don't. Like, I would go as far as to say that if Jalen Brunson was having this season on a team that was where the Magic are in the standings, he wouldn't make an All-NBA team. Nor do I think he would necessarily deserve to. Like, that's really where I'm at with Brunson's season this year. I don't think he's had a good season. It's been his worst season in New York. And we should demand much more than this for the final 23 games of the season. Because if this is what he's going to give them, they got no shot in the postseason. They don't. They'll win a round, and that's about it. That's what they will do. if this is the version of Jalen Brunson we're getting. He's got to be much better. And I care about that above and beyond any of the other shit that people talk about. The depth, not having another second ball handler, Karl Anthony Towns, Mike Brown doesn't yell enough, like Cal Bridges doesn't like contact. Like, great. All those things can be true. When is Jalen Brunson going to show up? When is Jalen Brunson going to be Jalen Brunson again?
I mean, for the first half of the year, I mean, he was averaging close to 30 points on pretty high efficiency. Like, this stretch has been bad, but they were really thriving, especially on offense, the first half of the season. And we kind of saw this a little bit last year, not so much from him, but especially, we hyper-focused on the hard stuff, right? Last year, and the lack of 5-out, but also not playing double big. Even Mitch didn't come back till later, but even with Huck 40, I think we both wanted to see more of him next to Cat. But it could be this thing where teams are adjusting, and he's going to have to figure out how to make his adjustment. And he's never failed to by the playoffs. But
just to since you brought it up, so I said I'll just want to read these off. This is from the first 30 games of the season. This doesn't include the Cup final. 35.5 minutes per game. He shot 38.7% from three on 8.1 threes per game. 47.6 from the field. 54.8 effective field goal percentage. 29.4 points, 6.6 assists. So that's very good. And again, over the last 24 games, he's at 33.8 minutes per game, 45.6% from the field. He's come down now to only 7 threes per game, 35.1% on those threes, 52.3 EFG, and then 23.5 points, 5.6 assists, 3.4 rebounds. So the percentages have dropped, the efficiency has dropped, and the volume has dropped in some ways. Like, I don't know what all the reason for that is. I think, like you mentioned, defenses have adjusted, but great players have to deal with adjustments all the time. We've seen Brunson do that in playoff series, postseasons. And, we saw that right in that Philly series where it's like, oh, the first 2 games, like, well, they put size on Brunson and that's that. He can't handle it. And it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to put up 40 and fucking 10 for 4 games in a row. He's got to figure it out. Mike Brown can do so many things, and he should do more. But Jalen Brunson has got to be better than this. He has to be. I'm just looking at this game log. Off the top of your head, here are their last 17 games. Off the top of your head, you tell me how many of these games you came away feeling like, wow, what a fucking awesome performance from Jalen Brunson, okay? I'm just going to name them. You probably know most of these off the top of your head. Lose to Dallas at home. I think we all know that nobody comes out with glory in that game. Brooklyn, 120-66. Whatever. Philly, 112-109. Pretty good. Good game. I wouldn't call him dominant, but you'd probably say a good game for him, right?
Yeah.
Sacramento, 103-87. Who cares? Toronto, 119-92. It's 5 of 13 from the field in that game.
Was that the game? That was the game where Kolek really changed everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and Bridges and Anunoby went off. Portland, 127-97. He goes 8 of 20 in that game, 26 points. Knicks win by 30. Wouldn't really call that a fantastic Brunson one. Lakers, 4 of 15. Knicks win by 12. Wizards, 132-101. He goes 7 of 16 from the field. Denver, this is like probably his best game of the season, right? 14 of 27 from the field, 42 points. Knicks win in double overtime. Basically, he kind of shows Jamal Murray levels in the final portion of the game. Detroit, you lose 80-118. That's a tough one. Boston, 111-89. This is a good game. I actually forgot about this. He played really well this game. 12 of 21 from the field. All right. He has 31 points. Knicks win by 22 on the road to Boston. Really good Brunson game. Started off the game really hot, too. Indiana, they lose 134-137. He goes 50-31 from the field, and has 40 points. This was the game though where he kind of hijacked the offense down the stretch, if we all remember that one. And then you got the game since then. He goes, this is a funny one. 3 of 6 against Philly. They win by 49 points. Who cares? Detroit, out of the All-Star break, 12 of 20 from the field, 33 points. They lose by 15. And then the last 3 games, Houston, Chicago, Cleveland. Like, he's got maybe 3 games in that stretch that you'd call like top-notch Brunson games. And one of those is in a loss against Indiana. Like, I'm just calling it like I see it. Like, I love Jalen Brunson. I want him to be great, and I think that the Knicks need him to be great to do anything worth doing. But he has not been great for a while now. It is what it is, you know.
So how do we make Brunson great again?
MBGA. I don't know, but you know, I think Mike Brown should probably figure that out. Because
Mike Brown great again.
Yeah.
MBGA.
It just feels like I mean, yesterday was a very. It just felt like all of the off-ball stuff we saw early in the season was so non-existent yesterday. Even against Houston, it felt like that. In Chicago, it felt like that, where it's like, well, Chicago early, he got off the ball, and that was good. But, like, it just feels like he's on the ball a lot, and dominating it and not trusting the system and not trusting that his movement can kind of create good offense for him and for others. And I think they really need him to get back to that. I think it would probably benefit. It will benefit everybody. It will benefit him, and it will benefit everybody else on the team. But they need it. They got to figure it out.
You look at the small guard thing, right? People have always talked about you can't win with the small guard as your top offensive option. The one guy who has done it, yes, nuclear shooter, but he constantly moved around, right? You look at
Tiny Archibald.
I mean, obviously, and I'm not saying Brunson needs to get to that level as either a shooter or a movement guy, but you saw it with Halliburton is taller, right? But what makes Halliburton special is not that he's, because of his height, he can exploit mismatches or something. I mean, he can go to the post and pull up mid-range, but that's not what really drove them. When you do switch, he's still moving constantly. He's improvising. And that's not exactly Brunson's game, but he's still a talented enough shooter and decision maker to add that dynamism. And that opens up. And we saw, and like, I'll keep coming back to this. We saw it with Kolek, where because he was moving the ball quickly, moving without the ball, it has a fraction of the talent of Brunson. There's nothing on that. I mean, he's maybe has better vision, but you know, he was tons of pace. And all of the guys, especially during that stretch we'd been criticizing, really just it flipped. You could feel the energy change. Bridges goes red hot, playing with a ton of confidence. OG is making plays on both ends and disrupt and just playing with a life force that we hadn't seen during that stretch. And Cat makes maybe one of the best plays of the year, where he like runs like his ass is on fire all the way down court, gets a rebound, and in one motion just throws it back to Bridges, I think, for the layup. You felt the energy change. And that's part of it. This team will go as Brunson goes. And look, we know that he can put a team on his back and elevate them because they trust him, and they'll make plays, especially on defense and on the glass, because they know that because they can see like how much he's giving them. But the next part is, can you elevate them, you know, in kind of this orchestra way, right? Can you evolve from being, you know, a Lennon to you know, to a Jimmy Page, right? Or to you know,
I thought you were going Soviet Union Lennon there.
I should have pronounced it. I guess I could have said Paul, right? But yeah. Can you
go from Vladimir Lenin to Joseph Stalin?
I would hope he's neither of those. The offense needs to be more communist, I guess, right? That's what we're saying. So, you know, it's.
But I don't think that's what we're saying, though, right? Like, because it's not like he wasn't look, he was taking 21.8 shots per game in the first 30 games of the
But
year.
it's how they
So
were
it's not like
coming
he
in
was
and all
not
of that.
shooting the ball, but it's how you generate those shots, how you derive those shots. And he's not deriving his shots right now in a way like, look, end of game stuff. Ultimately, it feels like we watched basketball for God knows how many years. No matter what era we're talking about, no matter what team we're talking about, it feels like end game basketball ultimately comes down to like, can you get the ball to your best player in a matchup you like, in a spot he likes, and can he create? And in those minutes, those spots, I never doubt Jalen Brunson. Even this year in games where he has not played well, I don't doubt Jalen Brunson. Like look at the Houston game on Saturday. Look at the Cavs game on Christmas Day. Right? Like he played bad in that game, and then the fourth quarter comes around, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, he remembers to be Jalen Brunson. So it feels like when he gets into those end game moments and it's simplified a bit, and it's just kind of like it's almost like a straightforward thought process, right? At that stage, there's less weighing on you because it's not about in the fourth quarter. It's not like you're like, oh, I got to go get Karl Anthony Towns going here, or I got to get Mikal Bridges touches here. It's like, no, we got to win the fucking game, and I think that maybe that makes it easier for him, which is weird. It's funny to think about, but like it in the start of games and in the first first 3 periods of games, it has felt like just it's kind of come undone a little bit. Some of the stuff that I thought was really good in the first half of the year to date, it has not felt as good in these last few games. And what the reason is for that, and who has to own what, and that's all we can debate it. But I don't think what can be debated is just simply that Brunson himself, like, we need more from him if we're going to do the things that we hope to do this year. And that doesn't mean other guys don't have to step. Mikal Bridges has really struggled for a while now. OG Anunoby has not been able to, he's not shot the ball well at all since he came back from injury.
But to
Josh
your
Hart's
point,
going through
these
his
things,
confidence issues with the three. Landry Shamit's been a little bit up and down here since the All-Star break. Whatever.
Mitch
We can
hasn't
talk
been
about all
quite
that stuff,
himself.
but
But
all that stuff is kind of like it's
isn't it
all
kind of
academic.
intertwined, as you said before, right? It's intertwined in the sense that when Brunson is playing with more energy and they're playing with more pace, that plays to those guys' strengths. And when it slows down, when there's more stagnancy, that's going to affect those guys too, right? Not to say that they shouldn't be held accountable on their own end, but it seems like these issues are interrelated.
Yeah, and I think one thing that Cleveland, what they were able, I think they got Brunson out of it was, weirdly enough, was Schroeder. Schroeder coming in and just pressuring him 94 feet, and it felt like Brunson kind of was like got annoyed by it and got thrown off a little bit, and it affected him, throughout the rest of the game after that point. But like, again, all the like, there's Knicks have every team has more than one issue. All those issues become academic if Brunson doesn't play up to what we need from Jalen Brunson, because you're not going to win a championship that way. So we will see where it goes from here. I believe in him to turn it around. This would be a hell of a time for him to do it because they need him right now. They need him. You can probably beat Milwaukee without Jalen Brunson operating at the top of his game. It is going to be a very challenging task to beat the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday if Jalen Brunson is not performing at his best. And as evidence, I will produce one 5 of 26 virtuoso performance from Stacy's favorite player, Cade Cunningham, on Monday night against the Spurs. You need Brunson to really have it in that game, because not only do they have this fucking overgrown alien at center, patrolling the paint, but you've got Stefan Castle, a guy who can really, really harass the ball handler.
One of your favorite players, right?
Yeah, my favorite player, as many are saying. But it's like it is time. It is time. They need him to figure it out. And it cannot just be fourth quarter crunch time, he comes alive. It has got to start being 48 minutes. We need full games. It needs to be steady, commanding performances
at both ends of the
guy
floor.
That's your franchise player.
And both ends of the floor. Because that's the other thing that Steph did. It has to be. I think Brunson has hit that mark more often than not in the playoffs. but
And
it has to be better than it's been this
actually.
season.
He's been better since the Knicks after they lost to the Mavericks. Like he's been a lot better defensively. Obviously, you're still going to find moments where he's not the best and he's got weaknesses and whatever. But like the Houston game, like he came up with two of the biggest plays of the game on defense in that closing time. So
Yeah, it doesn't have to be Lowry or even Steph, but it can't be Trae Young, which is what it was.
Yeah, it can't be Trae Young. But and like I agree with you, like it's got to be both ends, but like it definitely has to be on the offensive end. And we have not seen that. We have not seen a string of commanding, consistent Jalen Brunson performances in a while, in a couple of months. And that needs to happen because you've got to start ramping up for the playoffs here. And you've got to start getting into a rhythm. And it starts now. So, all right, Stacy, I know that you got to go, so we will call it here. Anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I don't have much to plug. I know we just had, I think I plugged last week the piece by Dallas Amico that just came out. I would recommend checking that out if you haven't. And we got a couple of pieces that have come out in recent days. So Max Wildstein just dropped a piece on Mitchell Robinson. And so we talked about, how important the offensive rebounding is. And, it's also kind of got me thinking that, maybe when the chips are down, it's not 5 out. That is the most consistent lineup. It's, it's going double big and doubling down on the offensive rebounding. But, definitely check out all the great work at Strickland. And I'll highlight that piece by Max that just came out this week or this weekend, I think.
Yeah. I will definitely be on the lookout for that. On FanDuel, by the way, the Knicks are now clear-cut fourth favorites in the East. They're at plus 460, Boston at plus 350, Pistons plus 350, Cavs leading the way at plus 270. I actually think the Knicks are pretty good value there. Just throwing that out there. I'm going to plug, so I'll plug all the work at Strickland. Check it out. And yes, check out the articles. Max wrote a good one, and so did Dallas. So be on the lookout for more. All right. Luca did too. All right, that is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great evening. The Knicks are back in action on Friday night against the Bucks, and then Sunday against San Antonio. So hopefully it's a good weekend. All right, that is our show for today. Again, hopefully everybody has a great week, and I'll see you on Friday. Peace.